It did not begin with war. There were no marching armies at first, no burning cities, no world-ending headlines. It began on an ordinary street, in an ordinary country, with ordinary people who believed nothing extraordinary could happen to them. Germany, after the First World War, was quiet in a dangerous way. Not peaceful, just tired. Shops opened late. Factories stood still. Men returned home with empty pockets and unanswered questions. They were not dreaming of power. They were dreaming of stability. At night, radios whispered more than they spoke. Newspapers carried bad news gently, as if afraid of being blamed for it. And in that silence, something else was learning how to breathe. History often prefers simple explanations. It tells us that Adolf Hitler appeared suddenly, as if evil knocked once and the world opened the door by accident. But nothing about his rise was sudden. Every step was visible, every warning was audible, and every delay was a decision. You are listening to Timeless History Audio, where history is told slowly, without urgency, so its lessons cannot escape unnoticed. If you find value in understanding the past without noise or haste, you are welcome to subscribe. These stories are made for those who listen carefully, because careful listening is exactly what was missing then. In the early 1920s, Germany was not searching for a dictator, it was searching for relief. Inflation erased savings overnight. Pride dissolved into humiliation, and democracy, still young, felt fragile and unfamiliar. People argued in cafes. They complained in long queues for bread. They waited for someone else to fix things. And waiting has consequences. Adolf Hitler did not seize power by force in those years. He learned first how to speak. Not loudly, not brilliantly, but persistently. He repeated the same ideas in small halls to small audiences. Most people ignored him. That was the first permission. Political rivals mocked him. Newspapers dismissed him as temporary. Institutions believed he would fade. That was the second permission. When his words grew harsher, they were labeled just rhetoric. When his followers grew angrier, they were labeled just extremists. And when violence began to flicker at the edges, it was labeled not serious enough. History would later label these moments differently, but at the time, they were simply tolerated. Power does not arrive wearing a crown, it arrives wearing patience. Hitler failed before he succeeded, and each failure taught him what resistance looked like and how weak it often was. When he was imprisoned after the beer hall putsch, many believed the story was over. It was not. Prison gave him time. Time to write, time to refine his message, time to understand that force alone would not open the door. So he chose legality, elections, speeches, coalitions. Step by step, he moved within the system that believed it could control him. That belief was the most dangerous one of all. What makes this story uncomfortable is not what Hitler did, it is what others did not do. They did not intervene early, they did not unite in time, they did not believe the threat was real until it was unavoidable. By the time the world began to speak loudly, its voice no longer mattered, because silence, repeated long enough, becomes approval. Power rarely announces itself. It studies the room first. By the early 1930s, Germany was no longer asking whether Adolf Hitler should be taken seriously. That question had already passed. The new question was quieter and far more dangerous. How much damage could he really do? Many believed the answer was not much. They believed institutions would hold, that laws would restrain him, that tradition would soften him. These beliefs were not naive. They were human. History is shaped less by villains than by reasonable people who assume limits still exist. When Hitler was appointed chancellor in 1933, it was not seen as the end of democracy, but as a temporary arrangement. He would be watched, he would be guided, he would be managed. That was the language of compromise. And compromise, when repeated too often, becomes surrender without realizing it. The early changes were subtle. A law here, a decree there. Each one explained as necessary, each one justified as temporary. Civil servants continued their work, judges continued their routines, newspapers adjusted their tone. Life appeared normal enough. That is how danger survives, by blending in. People do not resist what still feels familiar, and Hitler understood this better than anyone. He did not demand everything at once. He accepted patience as a strategy, because patience disarms urgency. There were warnings, always are. Some spoke against him, some protested, some wrote, but they did so separately. Division protected power more effectively than loyalty ever could. Opposition parties argued over methods, over ideology, over timing. Each believed the other should move first, and while they waited, authority consolidated. History does not punish disagreement, it punishes delay. Outside Germany, the world watched carefully and cautiously. No one wanted another war. No one wanted confrontation. Diplomacy became delay dressed as wisdom. Hitler violated agreements slowly enough that each violation felt negotiable. Each response came too late to undo the previous one. This is how escalation hides, not by speed, but by sequence. Ordinary citizens adapted. Adaptation is not endorsement, but it produces the same result. People learned what not to say, where not to look, which questions not to ask. They did not wake up one day accepting tyranny. They arrived there gradually, through adjustment. Adjustment feels harmless, until it becomes irreversible. What history often forgets is how quiet this transformation was. There was no single moment when everything collapsed. There was only a series of moments where doing nothing felt easier than acting. And doing nothing, repeated long enough, creates a system that no longer needs permission. By the time resistance became urgent, urgency had lost its power. This is why Hitler was not sudden. He was allowed. Not by one decision, but by thousands of small ones. Not by blind loyalty, but by reasonable hesitation. Not by chaos, but by order that refused to question itself. The lesson is not confined to Germany or to the 20th century. It belongs to any time where people believe someone else will intervene, where fear is normalized, where silence is mistaken for safety. History does not repeat itself loudly, it repeats itself quietly, until it no longer needs to repeat at all.